All right, guys, so Governor Maura Healey was just on the news over the weekend, and she keeps on claiming that Massachusetts is not a sanctuary state. But let's be real for a second here. In my opinion, the facts aren't lining up exactly, right? Case in point is the town of Natick, which just adopted policies that look an awful lot like sanctuary city rules. And if we're not a sanctuary state, then why since 2015 have so many towns and cities adopted similar policies, right? So while she's claiming she's tightening things up with new restrictions on emergency shelters, it feels to me, right, a little more like a smokescreen or some levels of deflection. Could be wrong about that. You let me know. But when towns are openly moving in the opposite direction, I don't know how people could feel any differently. And realistically, who's stuck with the fallout? It's the taxpayers. So today I'm going to share an article from the Herald. We're going to get into this. I'm going to share my screen. We'll go over some of this in detail. We'll take it from there. Let's get right into it. So it says, Maura Healey says Massachusetts is not a sanctuary state. Shelter costs will decrease. And it says taxpayers shelled out $856 million in 2024 for state-run shelters housing migrants. Okay? Want you to keep in mind that the city of Boston in their budget has inflated by 8%. And again, they are putting some of that burden on the taxpayers by increasing their taxes. That is from Mayor Michelle Wu. All right, let's get into the article. Governor Maura Healey pledged that the cost of running emergency shelters around housing migrants and locals would decrease from its historic levels and push back on conservatives who have labeled Massachusetts as a sanctuary state harboring illegal immigrants. In an end-of-year interview with the Herald ahead of her third year in office, Healey cast blame on the federal government for immigration issues in the Bay State, but said the expected $1 billion tab taxpayers are set to carry in each of the next several years will eventually deflate. Now, I don't know how it's going to potentially deflate unless they stop handing out money. But the issue is, as more of these towns, like Natick, if more areas are adopting more of these policies, how will it effectively deflate, right? If more people are moving here and they're coming from other states, right? So let's say New York, then how is it going to deflate? I just don't understand that logic. It's going to go down, she said from inside the State House. This is not a permanent situation, and it certainly is not sustainable. I agree with that. We've been talking about sustainability for a while now, which is why I felt comfortable making the policy decisions that I have made to ratchet down the numbers. Only migrants who are legally allowed or paroled into the United States can access the emergency shelter system, which Healey has placed a set of increasingly restrictive changes on ever since she declared a state of emergency in August 2023 amid an influx of migrants. The restrictions, including a 7,500 family cap on the system and limiting length of stays, appears to have had some effect. State officials reported spending less on state-run shelters in fiscal year 2024 than originally anticipated. Only $856 million rather than $932 million. The cost is still above the $325 million the state had historically spent on emergency assistance shelters, which were set up under a 1980s law to house homeless families with children and pregnant women. Arriving migrants and money spent to take care of them have become a flashpoint on Beacon Hill, where Republicans routinely tried this year to implement residency requirements on shelters and cut back spending. Top budget writers working for Healey are expected to ask legislature to approve another round of spending early in the new year to cover shelters for the remainder of fiscal year 2025. Without another injection of cash, money is expected to dry up in January, officials have said. That is concerning. Senator Ryan Fatman, a Sutton Republican, said even though new arrivals forced Healey to cut shelter costs and reduce the number of families relying on state aid, that has not stopped her from asking for more dollars to fund the system. The cost is overwhelming, he told the Herald in an interview this past month. In my opinion, what cost containment looks like is reforming the amount of time that people from out of state coming into the state could stay. You want to stay, it says you want to say 30 or 60 days. Okay, that's a good reform. Healy said the measures she has taken are working, though have faced harsh criticism from some advocates and are buoyed by the fact that 65% of families who have recently sought shelter from the state are from Massachusetts. We are not a sanctuary state, Healy said. We have a limited budget, and the emergency shelter system really was meant for Massachusetts families who were experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity and needed a place to go that was temporary. Again, this is a robbing from Peter to pay Paul situation where you're taking some liberties away from our own residents, right? We are trying to get to a place where emergency shelter is temporary and that it's really just there for limited purposes for a family, the governor added. But even as Healy touts her changes to state-run shelters, she has started to face a wave of conservative criticism for running what Republicans say is a sanctuary state, just as President-elect Donald Trump has promised to undertake mass deportations when he takes office next year. The term sanctuary state generally refers to a state or municipality's willingness to offer more protection to undocumented immigrants. Now, again, Natick did not have to pass what they passed. They're not claiming they are, it's not effectively a sanctuary town, but their policies somewhat mimic that, all right? But just because a city, and there was not much pushback on that either, by the way, it went right through. I think the vote was 5-0. But just because a city or town in Massachusetts considers itself a sanctuary does not mean there is no federal immigration enforcement, said Sarah Sherman Stokes, Associate Director of Boston University's Immigrants' Rights and Human Trafficking Clinic. There are gaps between some of the statewide laws and city policies that remain vulnerable and will still feed non-citizens into ICE custody, Stokes told the Herald. In Massachusetts, many point to a 2017 ruling from the Supreme Judicial Court that bars state and local police from detaining a person solely on the basis of their immigration status, a decision that has been used to prohibit interactions with federal immigration officials. So basically what they mean there is that our, local police, there's some issues there if they have to detain somebody based on their immigration status. They can't just do that. They could be breaking some of the, policies that were adopted to protect them, right? Healy said she believes violent criminals should be deported if they are not here lawfully. Now, what she said there, you could read many, many articles where they're essentially, they're detaining them, but then they're somewhat releasing them back into the streets. And that has happened throughout multiple towns here, if I'm not mistaken, at least based on the news that I read. Okay, and that local, state, and federal law enforcement should work together to investigate and prosecute crimes and remove people from the country who are criminals. But the first-term Democrat said she does not back showing up at a hotel and rounding up groups of people who are suspected to be here unlawfully, who are here working, and just deporting all them without a process. All right. So basically, she is going against what President-elect Donald Trump and Tom Homan would essentially like to do. I think what we need to do is work together here in Massachusetts to do both things: investigate, hold accountable, deport as necessary folks who are here unlawfully, who've engaged in criminal activity, absolutely, and also stand up and protect the people who have been working here, going to school here, raising kids here, to ensure that they are not scared to go to the doctors or drop their kids off or school or go home. I think they meant to school or go home from work. But anyway, so that's the status. So I think ultimately, regarding what she says, obviously these are politicians, sometimes they get on these news channels and they kind of dance around the questions. I think she answered some questions logically within. I watched the whole interview yesterday. I'm not going to do that to you guys because it's quite long. But anyway, I don't know. I seriously do not know what's going to happen. The only thing that I know is that claiming that we're not a sanctuary state when towns and cities so easily adopt the policies of what sanctuary status would be, I'm not exactly sure that is the right the right phrasing, what she had said there, again, in my opinion. So I don't know what you guys think about this. I'm a little surprised to some point. I think that she wants to deport people, as she said, that are criminals and so on and so forth. But I mean, realistically, if they're here illegally, they are already criminals to some extent, right? They didn't go through the process in order to get legal status. I realize that's difficult. I've talked to many people here that were immigrants that went through the legal process, and I know that it is quite difficult. But from the people that I've talked to that are friends of mine, they are also upset about this because of the amount of money that is being poured into that sector to a point, right? Because it's costing the taxpayers money, and they didn't have those benefits. And as you know, a lot of my previous videos, people had said the same thing in the comments. They're not actually on board with spending so much money because, again, something short term, you want to help people, of course, but then when it becomes to the point where it's not sustainable and then you have to, tax your residents, I don't see how that's fair. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought about the full video if you want to, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a Merry Christmas, by the way, guys. So tomorrow's Christmas Eve, the next day's Christmas. I don't know if I'll be on here over the next 2 days, but I'll be sure to be back after that. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye-bye.